Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqin wassalatu wassalamu ala man kana nabiyyan wa adamu bayna al-ma'i wat-tin. Amma ba'd. فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد ألف لام ميم أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون صدق الله العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. Respected elders, buzuks, brothers and sisters in Islam, first my sincere thanks for once again inviting me to your beautiful masjid here in Alihi. Alhamdulillah, I can see that since the last time I was here, which was I think about 2 years ago, there have been some wonderful developments in your masjid. May Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala put more barakah in your wealth, the same wealth which has allowed you to build the house of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah ensure that this masjid is always full with our youngsters, with our elders, so that they can benefit in this world and in the hereafter. Today, a very important topic area, a topic area which unfortunately is very topical, something which we see in our news all of the time, something which unfortunately has now come into our own community, our Muslim community, not just here, but throughout the Islamic world. The issue of mental health, the issue of happiness in general. So inshallah, to the best of my ability, I will try to give a perspective from a Islamic perspective of what Islam has to say on this very, very important topic area. I will start with what I think is the second most important part of the lecture. The most important part, inshallah ta'ala, I will let you know what that is, the point that I want you to go home with. The first thing I want to mention, which I think is very important, is I don't want, the title of the actual topic itself is Importance of Salah and Mental Health. So I've mentioned two things in the title, Salah and mental health. The last thing I want to do is to basically be very condescending and nagging towards you and basically evaluate and say, well, if you perform Salah, you won't have any mental health issues. I'm not going to say that Salah is completely the answer to all of your mental health issues. I think this is dangerous. Why? Because there are plenty of people in our community who are very pious, who are very religious, who perform all the Salahs, and unfortunately they too suffer from mental health issues. So it's very easy to make that sweeping statement as an alim, as an imam, and say the root cause of your problem is you're not coming to the masjid. If you want to save yourself from mental health issues, come to the masjid and finish the talk there. I think that's very, very condescending. I think that's very negative. I don't think it's going to help me. I don't think it's going to help you. Yes, I will say, and I think it's my haqq and it's my right to say it, that Islam always talks about prevention rather than cure. Trying to stop the problem from becoming a problem in the first place, rather than trying to cure it later. So in that sense, I will be very honest with you and say that to a large extent we can stop mental health issues if we turn to Islam and we have them. And yes, I think I'm right in saying that I can generalize and say those people who generally come to the mosque, who are generally more pious, they suffer less from mental health issues. The people who are suffering it more in our community are generally those people who spend less time for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I don't want to be dismissive. I really don't want to be condescending and looking down on you and say, well, just read namaz and all of your problems will actually be resolved. I don't want this lecture to be a I told you so lecture. That we've been banging on and on about namaz and about masjid all of this time. No one's listened, and that's why we find ourselves in this situation. Also, I don't want it to be a negative topic area. That by nature you might think that this is something which is very difficult to deal with. It's a sad, it's a depressing topic area. Look, for every single problem that we face, Islam has the solution. So we should take great faith in that. That Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala never puts us in a tight spot except He tells us how to get out of it. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala always gets us out of that. So today, inshallah ta'ala, the format of the program, we'll divide it into four simple points. We will start with a very, very basic definition of what mental health and what mental illnesses are about. Briefly, I will talk about the possible causes of mental health issues in this particular day and age. There are 101 reasons, but what I have done is I have summarized them into 4 or 5 simple reasons. So what are the possible causes of depression, of anxiety, of sadness in this day and age? Importantly, perhaps the most important part of the topic is to talk about what Islam has to say on that. But what perspective does Islam have, which is totally different to what we might have from a Western perspective, from other alternatives that sometimes people are offered. And then at the end, inshallah ta'ala, we will talk about the solutions as well. So inshallah, this program is part preventative and it's a part cure. Part of it is to stop you getting into this situation in the first place. And part of it is, well, if sometimes people are in this particular predicament, then how they can get out of it. Alihi tawakkaltu wa ilayhi unib, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. To begin with then, what is mental health and what is mental illness? Many different ways that our people have defined it. Generally speaking, it refers to a person's condition with regards to how they are thinking. It's to do with their inner state. It's to do with their emotional well-being. You might see, for example, a person in their community who is otherwise very positive, who is always laughing and is always very humorous. But sometimes you might find that his emotional state, that the way he behaves overnight almost has changed. You might actually ascribe this to a particular mental health issue. Likewise, you might find that a person's behavior has changed. He doesn't come out so much. He's not so sociable anymore. He is more inclined to spend time on his own. So generally speaking, it is how a person feels on the inside, and that has been disrupted. It seems that a person is not at ease at himself. Physically, he might be okay, but inside, how he thinks, how he reacts, how sad he is, how happy he is, that has always all taken a toll. So that seems then we say that this person might be suffering from mental illness. There are many different types of mental illness. And all of them, you could say mental illness now, or mental health is an umbrella term. And under that, there are specific types of mental illnesses. So for example, depression and anxiety. Depression always sad all of the time and has very, very little reason to smile. Anxiety, when a person is constantly worrying all of the time. This is also a type of a mental health issue. Insomnia. Insomnia is basically the inability to sleep at night. Sometimes this just might be seasonal. It might be stress-related for a very temporary period. But sometimes people suffer it from a very long period. And sometimes doctors and experts, what they say is that this might be because of a mental health issue. Schizophrenia is basically decided that you are two people at once. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is sometimes also considered as a mental health issue. A person, when he is texting, when he is on Snapchat, when he is on Twitter, he seems like a very likable and very happy and positive person. But then sometimes when you meet him in real life, it doesn't happen often, that he is totally different. It's almost as if social media has turned him into two individuals. Or likewise, a person, when he is with friends, he acts in a particular way. But then when he is with his family at home in privacy, then he acts in a different way. So it's almost as if he is taking two personas on, he's taking two personalities on. Sometimes, not always, this is also seen as a problem related to mental health. Phobias as well. Perhaps of the 6 I have given there, this is the most least likely. Everyone is scared of something by nature, that's what phobia means. Sometimes people are scared of the dark. Sometimes people are scared of spiders. They are scared of height. So they're all given a name. For most part, this is natural. Everyone is scared of something in some form or the other, even the eldest amongst us. Having said that, there are particular places where people will say, well, he has developed a phobia. For example, a phobia to sit with many people, to be sociable again. Sometimes people will say that this is also considered as a mental health issue. If I was to summarize it, especially for our youngsters, what is mental health? In a nutshell, it's the absence of happiness. It's an absence of positive thought. It's where optimism, this idea that the glass is half full rather than half empty, is dissipated in a person's life. So this is, inshallah ta'ala, what we will be talking about. Like I said at the beginning, current trends and current statistics, they are very, very difficult to pinpoint how much of a problem this is, especially here in the United Kingdom. If you hand out questionnaires, if you try to ask people on the streets and try to make some statistics out of it, it's very, very difficult. You can't really get it out of people. Are you depressed? And then write us yes or no. So the extent of mental health issues in this country is perhaps unknown. Perhaps more worrying is the fact that this country, in my opinion, from what I have seen over the last year, from the research I have done, they don't really have an answer. The West and the NHS and the government, all they are doing at this moment in time, which I think is a good thing anyway, is they're just trying to raise awareness about the issue. They want you to speak about it. You will see that there are plenty of celebrities, sports stars, even royalties, who sometimes mention mental health and the importance of it. The BBC and Sky News and the Times newspaper and the like, they are always keen to put these people forward and speak about these issues. To try to break the stigma that, you keep these things in. So they want people to be open about it. They want people to talk about it. But an actual cure for it, that is perhaps more difficult. Sometimes the NHS, they offer tablets to try to reduce the amount of stress and anxiety in a person's life. Quite often or not, this has side effects, like diarrhea, weight gain, insomnia, the inability to sleep at night. Sometimes you have groups and they say, well, basically just try to sit together with like-minded people, people who have suffered from the same illnesses as you, and talk about it. But I think it's very, very blurry at the moment, what the West has to offer in terms of a cure. And that's perhaps because of the complexity and how difficult this problem is. On the other hand, and inshallah ta'ala, you will see that Islam has a very, very clear perspective on this. That it's as if you are ready for this issue. In my opinion, this is not a new issue, we have just given it a name now. It has always existed. But Islam certainly, it has always had a very clear and direct way to actually face and to confront these particular issues. That again is the beauty and that is the perfection of our religion. What are the possible causes of depression? I'm going to concentrate on depression, on anxiety, on sadness in general. What are the possible causes for it? 101 reasons why a person might fall into depression, but I think in reality you can kind of summarize them into 4 or 5 reasons. And I will talk about each one very briefly. Number 1, fear of the past. By nature, as you grow up, as you get older, you look back at your life and you think about certain key points in your life where you made a particular decision. Later in life, you sometimes wonder whether that was the correct decision. When a person gets older, then he reflects on his life, he reflects on his current situation and compares and contrasts, and sometimes he wonders that perhaps I should have been more obedient to such and such person, to my parents, to my teachers. And by nature, because, hindsight is a wonderful thing, you look back and you reflect and you wonder, I should have done this. I should have gone for this job. I should have spent another year in education. I should have taken up this offer. By nature, a person sometimes, at any point in their life, they think about this in excess. And that can sometimes trigger depression and sadness. So one of the main causes of depression is that people look back on their life and they think, well, I should have done something different. Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever you were going to do, He has already predestined it for you. Everything happened for a reason. There was a hikmah behind it. But we will talk about that later, inshallah ta'ala. Number 2, fear of future. Again, something which is natural. I would say it would be unnatural if a person is not worried about the future. By nature, you are worried about your children and what kind of environment they are going to grow up tomorrow here in the United Kingdom. You are worried about whether there will be enough money to put food on the table each and every evening in the future. You are worried about the marriage prospects of your children. You are worried about yourself as well. All of these things are by nature, they happen to you. Sometimes it does cause depression. Politically and socially speaking, I think the whole country is in a depression right now thanks to Brexit. Complete mess. The large multinational companies, what they have done, and they have done this for the last 18 months, they have taken on consultants, experts in European affairs, and basically they have paid them huge amounts of money in consultancy fees, 10,000, 15,000 pounds per day. And they have basically said, this is our business, we're a car maker, for example, how on earth do we deal with Brexit? What's the best thing to do right now? These experts, they use very, very technical language, but in the end, all they say is we have no idea what's going to happen. Our Prime Minister doesn't know what's going to happen. So Brexit is one of those examples where everyone's got a reason to worry about the future. it is very, very difficult times at this particular point. Number 3, fear of death. It's one of those things where it happens to everyone, there is no escaping it whatsoever, but by nature, and this is perhaps the way that we are sometimes clinging on to the dunya, and we forget the akhirat, that everything here seems so perfect and beautiful, so alluring and attractive, that the whole idea of death, the whole philosophy of death, it scares us, and sometimes it gets us down. This idea that one day, this family, this house, this employment, this enjoyment, it will all end. Sometimes there are particular cases when a person, because of that he thinks about it for too long, that he is sometimes a victim of depression and sadness. Number 4, why do sometimes people fall victim of depression and sadness? In the one place where you would expect most sukoon, most happiness, most peace, in an otherwise very, very difficult world, sometimes it is unfortunate that people come home, and that is where the problems really start. There is a very, very massive attack on our families by the non-Muslims in this country and throughout the world right now. The family is the cornerstone of any community. If you want to destroy a community, a civilization, a religion, you start with the family. So externally there are many threats to the sanctity, to the beauty of the family, and unfortunately we are falling victim to that. Having said that, a lot of these problems are our own. Sometimes we get these complaints all of the time about the relationship between husband and wife, between a wife and the mother-in-law and the father-in-law, between siblings, between children, and all of this can add up. And it is unfortunate, but it's something that certainly needs our attention as well. Finally, technology does play a part as well, increasingly in this day and age. This is something which the non-Muslim experts certainly are highlighting. In particular, the whole idea of the smartphone. The smartphone is a wonderful piece of gadgetry. It has made our lives unbelievably easy. It has made it streamlined, efficient. Islamically speaking, we have taken so much benefit from the smartphone and the internet and all of this technology in front of us, which was absent only 10 years ago. But at the same time, it certainly is a double-edged sword. There are lots of ills associated with the smartphone. There are a lot of problems now that our youngsters in particular are facing, which they don't realize has come purely because of the smartphone. Human interaction is at its worst level. We simply don't talk anymore. Everything is done by WhatsApp. Sometimes people are in the same home and they won't speak to one another. Across the room they will text one another. Allah Akbar. You go to banks now. I might share the sentiment with you, I might not. I don't know how you feel about it. I go to the banks now, I go to Morrison's, I go to Ather. I want a human to serve me. I want some human interaction. I don't want to be in front of a computer all of the time. When I phone the insurance company, when I phone BT, I want to speak to someone. I don't want to be pressing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and all of these numbers, and in the end, all it is a short recorded message and goodbye. Human interaction is at its worst now. And it's turning us into robots, let's face it. So certainly these are some of the things that all add up, that all actually cause the problem of depression, of anxiety. This now is the most important part of it. Islam offers a beautiful, fresh perspective on dealing with sadness. Please, if you can understand this, then my journey has been worthwhile. This is the most important part, is that you have to understand that worries and temporary depression is part of life. Life is simply not one ascending line, that there are no ups and downs. You cannot expect a life of no hiccups or no hindrances. There are always ups and downs. You cannot eradicate this. You are always subject to some kind of depression, some kind of sadness at any point in your life. What Islam is going to teach you, and is going to give you beautiful tools in order to do that, is how to control it. You cannot expect even the most simplest of journeys to be trouble and stress-free. So I expect that with the journey of life. Even when I came here today from Leicester, in my mind when I set up at 2:15, in my mind, and it is imagination and it is fantasy, let's face it. I would imagine that this journey of mine is going to be perfect. Every single light I come to is going to be green. There's going to be no roadworks and no traffic. There's going to be no diversions and so forth. I'm dreaming, aren't I? You know, on some parts of the journey, especially here, nearer here to Quadley Heath, on the motorway I was doing 30 miles per hour. Yep. You know, the speed restrictions. You know, 30 miles per hour on the motorway, Allahu. So I'm kind of fantasizing if I think this journey is going to be a perfect one. Why expect that now with the journey of life? The second verse of Surah Al-Kabut, Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. What is wrong with our people? Do they really believe that they can say Amanna, they can say La ilaha illallah, Wahum la yuftanun, and after that Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala will not test them? Testing, imtihan, is part of life. You cannot escape it. Elsewhere in the Quran, a verse which I'm sure you are all familiar with, Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَنَّبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. We shall certainly, لَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, for those who have studied Arabic grammar, they will tell you that this is stress. We will undoubtedly, certainly test you. And then Allah goes on to explain how that test will manifest itself in your lives. Sometimes it will be through hunger, sometimes it will be through fear, sometimes it will be through loss, sometimes of people, sometimes of food, sometimes of mal. These things are actually inevitable. So don't think that you are going to live a life when you are smiling all the way through. It's simply not going to happen. You are going to have ups and downs. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Allah in the Holy Quran says, these are the days we rotate between people. You are not always going to be in a sad state. You will come out of it eventually. But please, Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding you and I that you are not always going to be in a positive state. There are going to be ups and downs as well. So all Islam has to say about sadness, about depression, about anxiety, is you cannot eradicate it. You cannot cut it out. You cannot completely have a stress-free life. What Islam is going to do, however, is teach you how to control it. To make sure that you are on top of it. To ensure that it's not in the front of your head at all times, but you can put it at the back of your head sometimes as well. That it doesn't spoil your sleep. Islam helps you to control it. Similarities exist between stress and anxiety and anger on the other hand. Anger is also something which the Quran mentions is something which is natural in everyone. You cannot eradicate anger in any person. It exists in every person. In some people it exists in more, in some people it exists less. But do not ever think that there is an angerless person in society. No. In the Quran, Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala praises those people, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ, those people, it's a very clever wording, who lower their anger, who minimize it. Allah doesn't use the word who eradicate their anger. So what Islam says to you and I when it comes to ghadab, when it comes to anger, is that you cannot eradicate and completely have an anger-free body. But what Allah will do, He will give you the tools and will give you brilliant advice of how to control it when you do have it. When you are standing, then sit down. When you are sitting, then lie down. Go and perform ablution wudu, drink some water, change your environment. Don't, for the love of Allah, make an important decision. So Allah is managing that. It's anger management, isn't it? He's not asking you to eradicate it, for Allah is your creator. He knows what's inside you best, and He knows what your inside is like. So there is a similarity between anger on the one hand and anxiety and stress on the other. Just like anger, you cannot eradicate stress and anxiety. What you can do is to learn to control it. Fear of the past, fear of the future is something which is found in every single one of us here. Having said that, I think it's very, very important to note that there is one genre of people, one category of people, a very unique category of people in our religion which don't have any fear of the past or any parishani or any negative thoughts about the future. And who are they? The awliya ikram. Ala inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. The awliya ikram, the friends of Allah, the saints of Allah, those people who are totally immersed in the love of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala, they live a very different life to you and I. For they don't have to worry about what has gone on. They don't have to worry about a thing about the future. And what a beautiful life that must be. So So when you hear the word awliya karam, please do not belittle this very special category of people that Allah has made in our religion. When you hear the stories about the waliullahs, about the awliya karam, take heed. Pay attention to it. So their life was very, very special. So these are the only people that are actually exempt from it. What our course of action is we are not going to get rid of stress, anxiety and depression in our life. What we can do is learn to control it. So inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to share with you 6 or 7 points, and there's something for everyone, I think. For all people of different ages, of how we can control it. Some of them might be more applicable to you, to the elders, some might be more applicable to the youngsters. You might find that all of them can be applied. If you find that none of them are applicable to you, it is your duty to tell me after the program. But all of them, I think in some form or the other, can help us to control the anxiety, to make us smile more. To make us remind ourselves that it's not all doom and gloom, that this sadness, that this depression and this problem that we have, they are short-term and temporary. Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah ta'ala, will take us out of it. The first one, a very, very interesting way of looking at it, is something called the 80-20 rule. This is something which economists, which psychologists, which psychiatrists talk about. It's also called the Pareto Principle, and it's named after an Italian economist who lived at the turn of the last century. His name was Pareto himself. What he realized, he was a farmer himself, he realized that on his farm in Italy, he used to grow peas, and he realized that 20% of the pea pods contained 80% of the peas. So there was a particular ratio, 80-20. Then he looked at the issue of land ownership in Italy, and he realized that 20% of people in Italy own 80% of the land in the country. And he found that that ratio stuck. This ratio, he realized, is 80-20. He realized it was found in all walks of life. And he began to expand this. As an economist, he realized that 80% of sales come from 20% of clients. Those people, for example, who are in restaurant business, they will realize, or driving instructors, they will realize that they have regular customers. Sometimes that brings in 80% of their income. Even when it comes to complaints. Later people, they built on this principle, this 80-20 rule, and they realized that 80% of complaints towards a company, they only come from 20% of the customers. It's the same people making the same complaints all of the time. Subhanallah, you can even apply this rule in sports as well. Today you might realize that 20% of sportsmen, they win 80% of the competitions. Look at tennis, men's tennis for the last decade. 4 men have basically won all of the competitions. 20% of them have won 80% of the competitions. Federer, Djokovic, Nadal and Murray. Even in the Premier League, 20% of the team, they have won 80% of all of the competitions. You see that it's only the regulars that win it, is the Arsenals, the Manchester United. I have to mention our beloved Leicester City now, I'm afraid. Who win the leagues. The rest of them, they are deprived of that. So this rule is found everywhere. Believe it or not, this rule is found in Islam as well. What does Islam say? If you are 80% happy with something, then tolerate the 20% you are not happy with. Focus on the 80%. When it comes to changing phones, you know, people, they say, I need to change my phone after 6 months. And if they had applied this rule, then most of the time they'll realize, I don't need to even change my phone. Because when you ask them, okay, why do you need to change your phone? They say, well, the battery life is killing me, or the screen size isn't big enough. But then what I would ask them to do is focus on the 80% good about that phone. People don't do that. In employment, sometimes people come to us and say, well, I'm not happy with my job. And a lot of the time we will ask them, well, can you think of at least 5, 6 things that are good about their jobs? And you'll realize eventually it all comes back to this ratio. 80% of the job is sometimes good. The 20% bad is a long commute. I have to work in the cold. The hours sometimes are unfriendly. I don't like my boss. Sometimes you can actually tolerate these kind of things. In Islam, certainly, we agree with this principle. There is no such thing as a 100% happy marriage. There is always a compromise. You're living in a utopia, you're living in a dream world if you think that you are going to find, for our sisters and for our brothers, that you're going to find a perfect partner. There will always be something in my wife as well. where there's something you say, you know something, I can't cope with that. What does Islam say? Just laugh it off. There is always 80% good in a person. My problem is, especially now that this rule that we are applying, we should try to apply it to humans as well. And I realize that to a large extent, because of the way we deal with people now, that if a person has 80% good in them and 20% bad, we tend to focus on the 20% bad in them. And we ignore the 80% good. This is not the sunnah of our Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam never stereotyped people. If he was the type to stereotype, then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu would never have accepted Islam. He came to our Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, wanting to kill him. He was the worst enemy. Our Messenger could have said, I've seen the bad in him, I'm not going near him ever again. But our Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, he was an advocate of this rule. He saw the good in him. So whenever you see people have husn zan, always look in the positive qualities that they have rather than the negative ones. Our Urdu-speaking imams that have built our mosques, that have served our community, who at every single hour of the day, whether it is a birth, whether it is a fortagi, whether it is a khatam, you give them a call and they are there for you. They never miss a salah. They do all of these things and they have built the foundation of Islam in this country. And sometimes our youngsters, I think it's unfair that they pick up on one point, they say they can't speak English properly. And they fall in love with the new breed of British scholars. And they say, look, they can speak English and they are articulate and they are intelligent and they know what's going on. But I'll be the first to admit that we might have this one good quality of speaking English, but we're missing the 99 good qualities that are to be found in our traditional scholars. The taqwa, the parezgari, the iman, the ikhlas, the sincerity. To work on a very, very low wage, purely for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes we need to look positive on these things. One way of looking at the whole issue of sadness and depression is say, well, look, it's not all bad. There is always something good in it. So this is one way of actually dealing with it. Which leads us to the next point, which is very, very similar to it. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he asked people to be more thankful. If you are more thankful, then Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you more. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are showing more gratitude and appreciation, then it means that you are drawing closer to your Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. Compare and contrast in everything that you have. In any situation that you find yourself when it comes to worldly affairs, just try to remember that it could be worse. Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala has put people in a much worse position than yourselves. And our Messenger said it beautifully when he said, "Unzuru ila man huwa asfala minkum wa la tanzuru ila man huwa fawqakum." When it comes to worldly affairs, when it comes to money, when it comes to employment, clothes, gadgets, how a person dresses, what car he drives. By nature, we tend to look at those people who are doing better than us. Those people who have got better watches on. Those people who dress better than us. Our Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, said, try to look at those people who are below you. When you look at people who are below you, then automatically you thank Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to word it differently, our sentences should start with I have rather than I want. When your sentences start with I have, most of the time that same sentence will conclude with Alhamdulillah. When you start the sentence with I want, the chances are that sentence will not conclude with Alhamdulillah. So compare and contrast where you are coming from. The third one, more direct, okay? When it comes to social media, when it comes to the smartphone, I have mentioned this at the beginning, that do not dismiss the power of social media for us Muslims in particular. We can listen to scholars now on YouTube, for example, who have passed away many, many years ago. Sometimes when it comes to live events, you have missed an event, or perhaps an event is in the northwest of the country, you cannot be there physically yourself. Alhamdulillah, summa alhamdulillah. These mediums that we have on the smartphone and so forth on the internet, it allows us to connect again. When it comes to books, when it comes to literature, it's amazing how much of a help now PDFs and all of these different programs have helped the ulama to find ahadith, to find particular references. So I am not against these things. I am not against technology as such. But at the same time, you need to be wary about the dangers of the smartphone. And I will pinpoint some of them. Number one, when it comes to social media, when it comes to Snapchat, when it comes to Twitter, when it comes to Facebook, and so forth, most of the time our youngsters, they only put up good posts about what's happening in their lives. The good things that are happening. They're down at the dessert parlor, let's take a picture of this ice cream I have in front of you. They're with their mates at the football game, let's take a selfie. So they're always, by nature, they want to put the best things that are happening on in their lives on Twitter, on Facebook, on Snapchat. But let's face it, that there are sometimes going to be bad things happening in their lives. Do people put up bad posts or what's going on? Usually they don't. What happens is, over a period of time, is that sometimes people, our youngsters, they end up living a double life. That they want to give the impression that because for a long period of time I have only put up good posts about myself, I want to continue that. I don't want people to get the impression that life isn't so brilliant at the moment. But at home, in the real world, it's not all that. Sometimes they're forced and they feel the pressure that even though I am sad and depressed, I am going to continue to put up the good posts that everything is going well for me. By the end of it, they are living a double life. One for social media and one for reality. This sometimes can cause troubles. I mentioned this earlier, that we need to be wary about the dangers of social media when it comes to human interaction. And inshallah ta'ala, we will talk about that later. Number three, I think there's no escaping it, that if you stare at your phone all of the time, in particular Instagram, you're going to get jealous sooner or later. Because you're looking at the lifestyle of the rich and famous. You're looking at the lifestyle of those people who have perfectly toned bodies, who have the best cuisine in front of them, who are driving wonderful motors. And sometimes if you're spending an hour a day, 2 hours a day, just gazing, drooling over pictures of possessions of other people have, you're basically going to say, hang on, why haven't I got that in my life? It goes against the principle that I just drew upon when our Messenger Alihi Wasalam said to try to look at those people who are less fortunate than you. Social media doesn't help that in a lot of the ways. People are realizing now, the manufacturers themselves are realizing that these phones that we have created is going to drive people crazy. Apple, I believe, they have something called screen time now. And screen time is basically to stop people spending too long on their phones, a means by which they can actually control it. People sometimes, they go on their phones for WhatsApp, they go on Twitter for a break from the real world. And I totally 100% agree with that. Everyone needs a breather every so often. But please, everyone should have a moment and analyze in their life that what else can I do to actually get that break from my life? To relax, to switch off. And a lot of the time there are some very, very good alternatives which unfortunately we have neglected over time. Reading is a brilliant thing. You can't read on the phone. It's simply because as soon as you start reading on the phone, a text goes off, and a message comes through, 10 other WhatsApp messages come through, and before you know it, you've lost concentration. You can read in peace with a book in front of you. We really need to start reading again. I have bought, alhamdulillah, there is a book that we published on the occasion of Mawlidun Nabi Alihi Salatu Wasalam, the beautiful names of our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we've left them on the table on the way out. Please take one. And we discover the joy of reading once again. There's something romantic and special about picking up a book, rather than trying to read on the phone. Take up sports. Take your sports very, very seriously. Sport is a brilliant way of actually realizing that people, our youngsters are on Fantasy League and PS4s and FIFA soccer. Go out and play. There is no substitute for that. I'm an old man now, but I still, half-heartedly go out on a Tuesday and a Friday night and make sure I play football. It's a great relief from what is otherwise a very difficult job. On a Tuesday evening, don't bother calling me on a Tuesday evening, you're not going to get hold of me. It's my hour of badminton, I don't pick up the phone for the love of Allah. No one's going to disturb that badminton session with my brothers, with my friends. Have something in your life which actually has that. We talked earlier about how we're becoming robots and how we communicate, real conversation. Pick up the phone sometimes. Rather than sending an emoji, show someone a real smile sometimes. There is something warm, there's something romantic, there's something special about that. Certainly in this day and age, volunteering is helping a lot of people. Volunteering is a great way. when it comes to the masjid, for example, when it comes to events, when people volunteer, that sense of contribution is amazing. These are all mechanisms by which you can actually get away from it all without depending on the smartphone. The smartphone is a real problem in society, to the extent I have heard non-Muslim experts say that it is safer to give a handgun to a 12-year-old rather than a smartphone.
Sure.
And that is where we have got to now. It's actually safer. My eldest, Aisha, she's 11 now, and she's going to secondary school. And I've said to her, please ask me for anything you want. Anything you want, I'll get it for you. But don't ask me for a smartphone. My nephew, who is older, he's 19 now, he didn't get a mobile phone until he was 18. And yes, when he was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, he moaned and moaned, I haven't got a phone, I haven't got a phone. As you can imagine, teenagers do. But now when he finally got it, he is the first to admit that I know why mom and dad say no to me. I totally understand it. 18-year-olds, I work with youngsters, especially in Nottingham, with troubled communities sometimes. 18-year-olds are coming up to me and saying, we are shocked with what 12-year-olds are doing on their phones right now.
That's true. That's true.
18-year-olds are saying that to me. If a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old or myself was saying that, then you could say because of the large gap, it's understandable to a certain extent. But 18-year-olds are saying that now, Allah. So we have to be very wary about that. Number 4, how to control depression and stress is something that we sometimes overlook. You never feel bad after doing good actions. It's simple as that. No one has ever done a good of piety. And I mean the most simplest of things, like holding the door for someone. You know, helping a granny across the street. Picking up some litter. No one has ever done a good act except they have felt good after it. There is a flip side to that as well. No one has ever performed a bad act and then felt great about it. It is always followed by depression, sadness, and regret. And that is how our Messenger Alihi Salatu Wasalam actually defined good and evil. Which is something, otherwise a definition which has troubled all the philosophers, all the great thinkers, right from the beginning of time. What is the definition of good? What is the definition of evil? Our Messenger Salallahu Alaihi Wasallam simply said, Al-birru ma itma'annat ilayhi nafs. That bir, goodness, it's just simple something that by its very nature, it brings out that happiness in you later. You get to sleep at night. Well, it's more mahaka bin nafs. And by nature, guna, sin, is something which makes you feel bad afterwards. No one swears, no one backbites, no one cheats, no one lies, except sooner or later they are overcome with regret and remorse. It catches up with them sooner or later. On the other hand, there is a wonderful, wonderful sentiment that Allah puts into your heart once you have done good. You know when you're doing something good. The more good you do, the better you will feel. The less likely you are to be subject to this sadness, to these ill feelings, to this negativity. It is as simple as that. The more good a'mal you do, the happier you will be. It shows in us. So this is very, very simple things. I think something that we can actually all take. Number 5, do not ever forget your messenger, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. By his own admission, he is the one who went through the most sufferings. He is the one who went through most hardship. And our messenger alayhi salatu wa salam never lied in his life. So when he makes that statement, you have to believe it. Our messenger alayhi salatu wa salam was asked, Ya Rasulullah, ayyun nasu ashaddu bala'a. Which type of people are tested most by Allah? Meaning, who gets it most? To which our messenger alayhi salatu wa salam said, Al-Anbiya. It is the Anbiya ikram. And of them, myself the most. Summa al-amsal fal-amsal. And then our messenger alayhi salatu wa salam went on to explain that the Anbiya ikram, they are tested most by Allah. Then what happens? The ones who are most similar to them, then the ones who are most similar to them. Meaning not in terms of nabuwa, for nabuwa has completely ended. Meaning who one takes of piety and parezgari, who has the characteristics of a good man, like the prophets. They are the ones who are tested most. The closer you are to Allah, believe it or not, it means that Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test you more. You look at the trials and tribulations of the great ulama ikram and awliya ikram. Many of them spent time in prison. Many of them were persecuted. Many of them had to migrate because of it. So do not ever think that the men of Allah, they are the ones who should have the most stress-free life. Rather, it is a test from Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our Messenger Salallahu alayhi wa sallam certainly was of that category, at the peak of it all. And all can agree that no one smiled more than Sayyiduna Rasulullah Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahu Akbar. When he used to smile, the whole of Medina Sharif used to light up. His smile was so beautiful that it was from A to A. And you could see his molar, the teeth at the back of the mouth. You could see them. That is how perfect and massive his smile was. And that smile, it was most radiant at times like Badr, at times like Hudaybiyah, when there was most trouble. So the seerah of our Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, certainly it is there for you to learn. Certainly it is there for you to actually try to implement as well. A beautiful verse, I think that this is one of the most beautiful verses of the Holy Quran. And whenever you go through sadness, whenever you're going through a difficult period, just remember, Allah is the one who created you. Allah knows how much muscle power you have better than you. Allah knows how much bardash you have more than anyone else. Allah knows how much sabr you have in your body. Allah knows how much power you have, spiritual, mental and otherwise. He is the one who puts you on earth. And it's a beautiful rule of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Allah would never put a burden on your shoulders more than you can carry. He puts it on your shoulders because He knows you are strong enough. If He knew you could not cope with it, He wouldn't give it to you in the first place. If you have a life where you are working 45 hours, where you have a mortgage, where you have young children, where you have very little time for yourself, and sometimes you stress out and say, how on earth is this happening? Allah has put you in that situation because He knows you are strong enough for it. If you remember this verse, then you will realize it will empower you. It will make you realize you are actually stronger than you think. And it is on this basis why suicide is totally haram in our religion. For anyone who suffers from suicidal tendencies, which unfortunately now is touching our community as well, please remind them that Allah has only put you in this situation because you can cope with it. He would never put you in a situation which would make you want to take your own life. Because even after the most darkest of nights, the sun always comes in the morning. So it is our responsibility when we find such people who have an extreme of this depression and they want to take their own lives, please remind them of this beautiful verse, a verse which has been repeated many times in the Holy Quran, that Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala would never put a weight on your shoulder knowing that you could not carry it. And Allah knows better what you are capable of rather than yourself. Now we come to the Salah part of it, that how Salah actually helps in this. And this itself, the Salah itself, I'm not just going to say read Salah and that's the end of it. I will show you different aspects of Salah, 3 or 4 different aspects of Salah and how it helps to control, to mitigate and to minimize the influence of mental health, of anxiety, of depression in our community. Number 1, this is something which is related to our youngsters in particular. Youngsters, a lot of the time they complain of headaches, they complain of stress, they complain of migraines. Migraines are basically longer forms, very extreme forms of headaches. So sometimes they complain about these things. A lot of the time, these same people who are complaining about them, they are working in places where they are surrounded by computers. They are surrounded by electrical equipment. Let's face it now, I think we find that everywhere now. Whether it is a school, college, university, wherever you are employed, you are surrounded by electrical equipment. Whether you realize it or not, that these electrical equipment around you, the phones, the computers, the checkouts and so forth, they are giving off electromagnetic waves, positive waves. And this is building up in your body, it's coming into your body. And it's creating a positive charge inside your body. You don't realize it. This sometimes it is causing the laziness. Sometimes it causes the headaches. Sometimes it causes that effect when you come home and you say, I can't be bothered doing anything. So this has been going on for a while now. I have to say, make it clear that this is non-Muslim researchers who looked into it, people from Europe. They looked into this issue and they said, well look, we realize that a lot of our people now, they are surrounded by electrical equipment at all times, and this is creating a positive charge inside them. And sometimes it can lead to basic problems, lethargy, laziness. migraines and headaches. How do we get rid of that? What these scientists, they realized, they said, Subhanallah, they said that all you have to do is to get rid of the positive charge in your body, is to place your forehead against the ground. And what that does then is all of that positive energy that has built up from the electrical equipment, it passes into the ground and goes into it. And the example they give is sometimes you see tall buildings, which are more prone to thunder and lightning. These tall buildings, they have a mechanism by which, when it is struck by lightning, that this lightning now, the power of it goes straight into the ground rather than through the building. If it goes through the building, it might destroy all the electrical components in it. So all that positive energy from the lightning, it goes straight into the ground. The scientists have said that that's exactly what placing your head on the ground does. But to word it differently, that is what sajda does. Allah. And the beautiful point of this is that the same scientists, they have said that place your forehead on the ground, it's not just placing it, but placing it firmly for a while. And they have actually said that it works better if you are facing the center of the universe, the world. But to word it differently, if you are facing Makkah Sharif, because of the compass and the way things work. Allahu Akbar. We do the sajda because it is the sunnah of the angels. We do sajda because this is the beautiful example of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. We do sajda because our messenger said, أَقْرَبُ مَا يَكُونُ الْعَبْدُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلْ وَهُوَ سَاجِدٌ. That the closest a person will get to Allah, subhanallah, paradoxically, he is closest to Allah when he had his head on the ground, in sajda. We do sajda for all of these reasons, but look at the physical, look at the medical, look at the spiritual benefits of doing sajda as well. Each and every age, you would find that people, they found something new about the benefits of Salah. And this is something which has come across very, very recently. Until the day of Qiyamah, people will continue to derive the medical, the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the psychological benefits of Salah. And this is the beauty of our religion. You spoke to someone about this 1,000 years ago and they would have said, what are you on about? But today we can understand that. In 1,000 years' time, subhanallah, someone will be sitting here and they will be telling you some other medical benefit of performing Salah. This is the beauty and this is the perfection of our religion. Number two, the dominance of the smartphone is increasingly, I've mentioned it before, it's making us less human. Everything is automated right now, people are talking much less. That is exactly why Allah and His Messenger have stressed the importance of coming to the masjid for jama'ah. It is the religious media, not the social media. And that is why, if you think about it, that Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, if you're not going to come every day, I want you on an obligatory basis to come at least once to the house of Allah in a week on the day of Friday. And so that you are reminded that this is a religious duty, it's a spiritual duty. But at the same time, it's also a social duty as well. Allah wants you to interact with humans. He wants you to meet and greet. He wants you to come nice and early and sit there and listen to the Imam, stay for Mustafa Jani Rahmat at the end, meet people. He wants you to hear the i'lanats so that you know what is going on in your community. And this is why our Messenger Alihi Salatu Wasalam said, if you come into Jummah, have a bath. If you come into Jummah, wear some Ather. If you come into Jummah, make sure you put your clean clothes on. Why? I want you to interact with people later. I want you to be in your best condition when you meet and hug people. I want you to come together. Social media, the way that life is in this day and age, is not very human. Salah and coming to the masjid regularly, it's bringing us together again. Even in the most simplest of manners. I say this often, in particular to our youngsters. My best friends, even now, are all from the masjid. I don't know anyone anymore from my school, from my college, and from my university days. I haven't got any of their numbers. The people I play football with even today, they are the same ones I play football with from the masjid from the age of 11. I've known them all my life. They're the most reliable people. You know when you ask your father, do you know a plumber, do you know an electrician, do you know an accountant? Most of the time, he doesn't pick up yellow pages. What does he do? He thinks that which namazi is an accountant, which namazi is the driving instructor. True, isn't it? These are small things, aren't they? But it all builds up, doesn't it? And it shows that how important the masjid is in our community. It is the center in so many different ways. And that takes us on to the third point, which is related to the tranquility of the mosque. Most of our stress is dunya related. When you enter into the masjid and you recite Allahumma ftahli abwaba rahmatik, you leave dunya there. Our Messenger Alihi Wasalam said, don't talk about dunya in this place. Why? Because this is the one place we want it to be dunya free. You get enough parishani and problems outside. You want to come into the masjid and experience sheer tranquility, itminan and peace. The only way you can do that is to keep this place dunya free. And that is why our Messenger Alihi Wasalam, you see, notices all of the time in our masajid that don't talk about worldly things in the mosque. Why? We get enough of it as it is out there. Keep this one place dunya free. Keep this place for Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's an absence of dunya. So these things, again, they add up, they actually help towards making this place a more serene, a more important place. Physical well-being, I don't need to remind you this, I'm not going to spend too much time with this. That when you are performing salah, you are working out as well. All dietitians, all physios and all people will tell you that it's not exercise that makes you a better person, it's regular exercise. If you were just, like we see because of the New Year's resolution, if you were just working intensely in the month of January and then for the next 11 months doing absolutely nothing, then it does nothing for your body. It's just regular exercise that actually makes you better. That is exactly what Salah is. In the morning, that is when your body is at its most rusty. That is why Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'll give you only 4 rakats, but I want you to do a basic workout. You are also at your hungriest then in the day. So that is why Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His hikmah, has kept this the shortest salah. At the end of the day, typically that is the time when we have ate the most. So Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I want you to work out a bit more, I'll make it 17 rakats in Isha prayer. Again, the doctors and the dietitians today, they are stressing, do some basic workout before going to sleep. And that is why our Messenger Alihi Wasalam said, try to make Isha the last thing you do before you go to sleep. People get fat, people suffer from obesity because they eat and then they sit idle. They don't move. That is why in the month of Ramadan, this is when you eat the most in any part of the year. The most you will ever eat in the entire Islamic calendar is at the iftar time in the month of Ramadan. You basically stuff yourself, we all do. So that is at the time now where that, if you don't move, it's going to turn into fat, it's going to cause a lot of trouble. So what has Allah and His Messenger decided? That is when you are going to recite Salatul Tarawih. That is why it has to be 20 rakats as well. It's to burn it off. This is the same reason why our Messenger Alihi Wasalam said that if you find yourself in a position where the khana is ready, when the food is ready, and it is salah time, so long as you have sufficient time to read the salah, always eat first. 2 reasons. Why? If you read salah first and say, I'll eat later, let's face it, we're not going to concentrate very well in our salah. We're going to be thinking about the chicken tikka and the kebabs and the borscht and the naans. Our attention will be somewhat diverted. The second reason why is once you have ate, you need a light workout. And that is actually provided by the salah itself. So when it comes to the physical point and the ablution, subhanallah, when you use water all of the time, it is lowering your blood pressure. Water is an amazing way to calm yourself down. Our relationship with water, I think, has been underestimated in this country. Our Prophet ﷺ encouraged it. He said that even staring at running water, it brings release to you. It releases your stress. Anyone ever done that, they will tell you that. That just by looking at a stream going past, Allahu Akbar, it's mesmerizing. It calms you down. I travel a lot. For most part, I hate traveling. I hate driving. But one thing I do love is the countryside of this, what is otherwise a beautiful country. The countryside in this country is amazing. It's beautiful. Looking at green things, it brings down your blood pressure. It's soothing. We live in a concrete jungle now. We need to find time to go to the countryside to actually spend time there as well. This is also a way of actually providing release from these situations. The final thing is that our Prophet ﷺ, who was the greatest of all doctors, specifically, he gave us du'as, he gave us waza'ib, he gave us askar that are there particularly to mitigate the influence of depression and sadness. Wazife. But importantly, and I will share three with you, the three wasaib, I'll share three with you, these three, all of them are to be performed either just before Salah or after the Salah. It's almost like a pill. But that pill, sometimes your doctor says you have to have this pill after the meal. You can't have it before. Otherwise, it won't have its effect. It won't have any improvement on your physical body. In exactly the same way, our Messenger ﷺ gave a pill in the form of these simple azkar. But he told us when to take them. He said, always take them after Salah. I'll share three with you. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. A dua that you learn as a youngster is something that you should recite as often as possible. Our Messenger ﷺ said that this is a cure for 99 illnesses. And of those 99 illnesses, sadness and depression is the least important of them. Meaning it's only number one. There are 98 more worrying problems that la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim cures. When does this work most effectively? When you're doing it at Salah time. And that is why you will see that this is recited at Salah time when you hear the azan, when you hear hayya ala salah, hayya ala al-falah, what should you be reciting? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. So the first dua, a simple dua, a wazifa for our youngsters, for our elders, always recite la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Number two, astaghfirullah rabbi min kulli zambin wa atubu ilayh. Seeking forgiveness from Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our Messenger used to perform this wazifa 100 times a day. He used to seek forgiveness from his sins, and he never made a sin in his life. He was ma'soom. He was perfect. He was sinless. And yet he used to seek forgiveness from his sins, Allahu Akbar, 100 times a day. He was teaching you and I a lesson. He was reading this for our sake. What does astaghfirullah rabbi min kulli zambin wa atubu ilayh do? Our Messenger ﷺ said, whosoever recites this regularly, Allah will create an exit for him from every tight spot. He will give him relief from every sadness and will provide him like he could never imagine. When is astaghfirullah recited? Recite it whenever you can. But in particular, our Messenger ﷺ said what? That after every Fajr prayer, recite astaghfirullah 3 times. Again, it's linked with Salah time. Tasbih Fatima. Today, our youngsters. Okay, I say come to our program. In let's go, I'm more frank with them. I say, why are you coming to my program? Hafsab, you don't know how stressed my zindagi is, my life is. Hafsab, you don't know what it's like right now. Hafsab, I got a 45-hour shift. I got this many assignments to give. I got this. The tight schedule everyone talks about. Our youngsters go on and on about it. They make it out as if, they need 26 hours in a day, not 24. Everyone talks about the work schedule now. Sayyida Fatima radiyallahu ta'ala anha 1,400 years ago said the same thing to our Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. She said that, Ya Rasulullah, I have a hectic schedule at home through religion and through other means, through marriage as well. Please give me something by which there is an extra hour in the day for me. That I can relieve my stress. That my workload is lessened. Our Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, subhanallah, the perfect doctor. He said, recite subhanallah 33 times after every salah. Alhamdulillah 33 times, and Allahu Akbar 34 times. And this is for you and I. Those people who recite this dua, you will realize this. Please try it for a week, and you will realize you will never say that I have run out of time. Allah will put barakat in your time. This is 21st century problems, 14th century solutions. Our biggest problem is, to a certain extent, is that we think that today's problems cannot be solved by yesterday's guidance. Nothing is further away from the truth. Yesterday I was in a Jummah page the other day, I was talking about Islam's perspective on Brexit. We talk about mental health issues, we talk about obesity, we talk about a lot of the ills of society. We have an Islamic perspective on it if you're willing to listen to it. There is not a single headline in the news today except Islam has an approach to it. But our problem is that to a certain extent we think, no, this is a political problem, only the politicians can solve it. This is a medical problem, only our doctors can solve it. No, Islam can solve everything. We need to give it an opportunity though. When it comes to our financial, our mental, our psychological state, sometimes we do tend to go to others. We should always resort to Islam. To conclude then, the last thing, I will once again reiterate the fact, please, we as Muslims truly believe that sadness, depression, bouts of feeling negative, these are all temporary. Every single person will get it. There is no such thing as a person who says, I have a stress-free life. If he's saying that, then he is from the awliya ikram. And then certainly then you should be kissing his hands. You should be taking your hearts from him. Islam is all about controlling it. Islam is facing that idea that, look, I have the tools, I have the mechanism to actually try to reduce what is happening as well. This is the way to actually go about it. Ibn Hazm is a great scholar. He said, and I think this is a problem that we do, it's a way of looking at the whole issue as well. One way of getting, a simple way of realizing that how short-sighted we have become. A way to relieve all of our problems. It's quite simply, remember the akhirat. Remember the hereafter. How many days do we have to actually go through this hardship and difficulty? And what is Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala got waiting for us in the akhirat? Allahu Akbar. What is 20, 30, 50, 150 years in comparison to eternity? I will only have to think about what ni'mah I want and Allah will deliver it in front of me in Jannah. Allahu Akbar. Today, I think our youngsters, we should try to encourage them to think about Jannah as much as possible. The more you think about Jannah, the more you will forget about this mal'oon, cursed dunya that we live in. This is what is, it's just a shade under a tree. We're going elsewhere, Allahu Akbar. Whatever Allah has given us, He's just given it as a test. It's a short period. We have 110% conviction, yaqeen, iman, that Allah has something greater waiting for us. It's not shock. It's not maybe. It's there waiting for you. And the more you actually think about that, the more you fantasize about it, although the reality is that it's not fantasy, it's there, it's haqiqat. The more you will forget the trouble and the strife related to this dunya. May Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us all to be optimistic about our life. May Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us all to grow in the rahmah of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh al-mubin.